Hello, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Maurie, and I'm here with my husband Jim, and we are trying something just a little bit different tonight. We were convinced to go ahead and video our podcast, and so one of the things that we started doing is we started sitting in these chairs with my iPhone, and let's face it, the equipment that you use for just in-house podcasting can be a little,
Challenging?
not so professional. Yeah, a little challenging. That's a good word for it. So I told Jim, I was like, look, you spend most of your time in your office anyway doing stuff with artificial intelligence. So let's just literally use the product that we use all the time, which is Riverside FM. And no, I'm not getting paid to say that. But it's a great product for podcasting. And I'm just going to invite Jim on Sunday evenings to join in and talk about it. So, hi, Jim. How are you doing out there in your workshop?
I'm doing great. If you ever came to my workshop.
Hey, I was out there with a broom the other day because it needs to be cleaned.
That's true. That's true. It does.
So, some of the things that we've been doing just recently, we actually went to the State of AI in Austin event. I'm part of the Austin AI Alliance, and as a board member, I needed to be there, but I really wanted to be there. We actually set up a vendor table, and we got to talk to some really interesting people. Jim and Matthew, our CFO, manned the booth. And one of the questions that was asked during the panel discussions was about the environmental impact of artificial intelligence. And then our daughter actually mentioned it as a topic for us to talk about on our podcast. So I decided that what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually kind of interview Jim about environmental impact of artificial intelligence. The other thing that I thought was interesting is that today we were actually speaking on a panel discussion for the city of Marble Falls. And one of the things that we met people that have a lot to do with the grid, the water situation there in Marble Falls. So I think an environmental topic for today is really a good idea.
Well, they asked, we actually discussed it with them, the whole, what is the environmental impact, because they say they get people, companies that send them stuff all the time about locating data centers in Marble Falls, and they have to evaluate it based on the fact that they have a finite amount of water.
Yes. Yeah, they turn things down. That's what she said. They said, they have to actually say sorry, no, because they don't have the infrastructure to support some of the businesses that are asking to come in. But they are working on a solution to that. So I think that's amazing that they're willing to find that solution so that their economy can continue to grow. So let's get started. Our daughter had mentioned that we needed to do this, and I think the reason is because she works for a company that's heavily into energy generation and transmission, like the Lower Colorado River Authority, which, Jim, you can explain a little bit more. They basically are the water management for everything from a certain part of Texas all the way down to the Gulf, right?
Yes. Actually, they manage what do they call it? The watershed for the Colorado River, which includes Llano. The city of Llano actually buys electricity from the Lower Colorado River Authority.
And the way that we have fiber at the school.
They bid on it whenever we put the bid out for the grant we had. They bid on it. They were the best choice for us, and they've been a great partner for the school district as well. So anyway, it was interesting for me because Rachel asked me about this. I think about it, but I haven't done much research on it because honestly, I've got too many other things that I'm working on. It's hard for me. What is it? It's hard to worry about. Never mind. Why you're draining the swamp when you're up to your ass in alligators.
I'll say it.
Nonetheless, so it was a good exercise. I did use a new tool. I learned some lessons, but I used a new tool called Deep Research, which I have access to through OpenAI now because we're paying.
Okay, go ahead. Tell them how much it's costing.
It's costing.
You see this? This is a cup that's actually made at home.
I made it.
I didn't get to go out and purchase this.
That's
because
tea, not coffee, too.
It is tea. Well, it's too late in the day for coffee, but still, it's $200 a month. So
it is, but I had to have access. I had to. It was a
moral imperative. And I will tell you, The research you've done with it so far is pretty amazing. So you did some research. So let's talk. I'm going to start asking you some questions. You ready?
Okay, shoot. Now, I do have a lot of stats, so I'm going to be reading off the screen because I did not memorize all this stuff. It is interesting because of the experience I have, I was able to guide the research quite a bit because I remember these conversations when the World Wide Web and all the cloud computing stuff started becoming a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of discussions. I mean, back then, power usage was a thing too. So anyway, so there's some interesting stats that I can share. So go for it. What do you got?
Question number 1. We talk a lot about AI doing all this amazing stuff, but if we're going to get real, it's using a heck of a lot of energy, right? So are we talking like one house per chatbot levels, or are we talking small city? It's like, what are we talking here? How much energy? When I ask ChatGPT or any of the AIs to like give me an answer about something, how much energy am I using?
The interesting part about it is you have to divide this conversation into 2 parts. You have to divide it into training and inference. Training is what people think about the most because you're training the model initially and you use a lot of power. ChatGPT 3, which is one of the first models released a couple of years ago, nobody uses it anymore really, but it used approximately 1,287 megawatt hours and emitted 502 metric tons of CO2. Just to get that in perspective, that's equivalent to the emissions of 112 gasoline-powered cars for 1 year. Now, they only did that once for 3. Of course, then they trained 4. Well, they train 4 and they train a lot of models. So they do use a lot of energy. And they're not the only ones doing it. That's just OpenAI. That doesn't include Google and all the other folks. So as a matter of fact, the research I found was that GPT-4 probably, it would make sense that it would consume more because it's a bigger model. So
sorry. I read somewhere that running a single GPT, like a ChatGPT query, takes more energy than like a Google search.
It does. Actually,
What's the difference?
Well, it's interesting because a single chat uses 100 times more energy than a traditional Google search. And I mean, relatively, it's 0.00003 kilowatts, 2.03, but still, when you start talking about hundreds of millions of people, that is a lot of difference. Now, part of that difference is because Google doesn't have to do a lot of mathematical calculations in order to answer a question. Every time you ask for an inference, GPUs are turning on. I've got Agnes running some local models at school for us to use. And when I ask it a question, it does an inference. You can watch the GPU start kind of scaling up, and I can nail it at 100%. It's a 24 gig GPU with liquid cooled, and that's me asking it a question. Now, it doesn't take long, but it's still a lot of calculations. Whereas a lot of Google spends a huge amount of time pre-indexing things. So Google tries to answer your question before you ask it. Most popular questions, things like that. They've been doing it a long time. So, but it's 100 times more energy. Now that will change over time, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but
well, it's power hungry, right?
And that's one of the things
that everyone says it's power hungry. You have a lot of people saying that it's horrible. We shouldn't be doing it. But hasn't it gotten more efficient as it's been here for the last few years? I mean, it's like comparing an old brick of a laptop, the big, huge ones that you used to have to, lift weights every day to be able to lift it and carry it around with you when you traveled, to what we have today.
You're going to start showing your age if you're not careful.
It's okay. I'm old.
Are you going to say
I admit it.
The P word? You're going to say the P word? Pentium?
Am I going to say the
Pentium?
Pentium processor?
If you remember back when those came out, the Pentium 4 was a beast of a power hog. So I got some stats on that because I have some seasoning. That's another term for being
I like
older.
that.
I have some seasoning when it comes to technology because I've been in it since I was a teenager. And I remember when they came out, there was a lot of discussions about, oh my God, that thing uses so much power.
I have to interrupt you.
What?
The reason I have to interrupt you is because you just said you've been in it since you were a teenager. Now, something that a lot of people don't know about us is that we are married. We've been married for a long time, but we actually started dating very young, like
We
high
did.
school sweethearts.
Yes.
And the first summer that I dated you, what did we do?
Nerdvana, that's what we did. That was the greatest summer because we not only built from scratch soldering chips on the board, we
A
built our own.
Heathkit
It
computer.
was a Heathkit that you programmed in Octal with a keypad. It was so awesome. And then what did we do in the evenings? We played video games at the kiosks at the store. God. That was Nerdvana.
So when Jim says that he's been doing technology since he was a teenager, he literally means that he has been a technology freak since he was a teenager.
I got my first computer when I was like 15. And it was a kid. It was a kid as well. But
anyway, I'm sorry. I digressed. Keep talking about what you're talking about. How is it getting more efficient? Is it,
again, let's look at scale. The Pentium 4, which was the big thing in the 2000s, early, it used 1,000 times more power. An NVIDIA A1 GPU, which is the current thing, which can run at 48.7 gigaflops, which doesn't mean anything to most people, whereas the Pentium 4 ran at 0.05. The difference between them, though, is it's 1,000 times more efficient. So AI still consumes more power because there's so many workloads. I really think that we're talking about, you can't forget my favorite thing, Jevons paradox. Because even if you get something that is 1,000 times more efficient power-wise, and that will continue to happen. Just for scale, I read once recently that Google has 2.3 million servers that they do search. 2.3 million servers. One of the things that Google did to make it better was they made their own tensor processors. They call them TPUs. They made their own processors so they could get their power requirements down because they have to pay the power bill at the end of the day. Right. So it's a money thing. So you have to look at it as a scaling problem. Yes, it uses more power now, but it will use less and less power over time. So it'll get the inferencing. There's already chips out there that do inferencing. Again, if I didn't explain that a second ago, the difference between training and inferencing is training is when you do it once, you get the model trained, maybe you do some tuning. Everything you do after that, asking questions, some of them call it test time compute, but I call it inferencing compute. Either way, you ask a question, that's inferencing. It has to go off and figure it out.
It's when it goes out and generates the answer.
Yeah, correct. It's got all that generative AI. Yeah. Generative AI, that's what it stands for. Anyway, so the problem is that Jevons paradox, which means that there was a economist back in the 1800s that was looking at the efficiencies in steam engines. They got better over time because they used a lot of coal. So coal was expensive. So they kept improving the efficiency as they used it more. The problem is as they improved the efficiency, people liked them and they were cheaper to run. And so more people started using them for other things. So the the coal requirements jumped above what they were when the steam engines were incredibly inefficient because more people were using it. I think you're going to have the same problem. More and more people are using AI. They get thousands of times more efficient. So the inferencing is a lot better, but then more and more people use it. So anyway, one of
the stats that you mentioned today when we were talking to the city of Marble Falls that I thought was interesting is that, was it Perplexity that just did a big survey? Who was it that just did the big survey? Anthropic just did a big survey, and basically they came back and said that if somebody starts using AI, they don't stop. Like the percentage of people who tried it out and then canceled their account or they stopped using it completely, their percentage was 0.
Well, it wasn't just a percentage. It was literally 0 people. They didn't find a single person who had started using AI for their work,
workflow and stuff,
workflows and stuff like that. Once they started it, they didn't stop.
Yeah, so, you realize how much more efficient you can be. One of the things that I like to say is that it's made me attempt to do things that I never thought I would do before. It's given me the courage to do things that I never would have thought about.
I do it all the time. I agree with you. I do the same thing all the time.
But when you talk about efficiency, one of the things that we ended up putting a lot of stuff in the cloud, like cloud computing. Wasn't that supposed to make everything better, like have less waste?
It does.
Okay, so
because cloud data centers, I did some stats on that too. Cloud data centers are almost 2 times more efficient than your typical enterprise. I mean, if you think about it, I have sort of a little mini data center. I have servers and I run those servers. The thing is though, is the way I do it, because I'm a it's me setting up these data centers is going to be less efficient and less optimized than people who do it every single day. That's what they do. They come in for a living. They try to find ways to optimize energy use and all that other stuff. So they are more efficient. It's the same thing with power generation itself. When power generation was first starting in the United States, everybody generated their own. All the companies did. But over time, they set up these big generation plants that were inevitably more efficient so they could sell electricity cheaper, and everybody stopped doing it themselves. So everybody moved stuff in the cloud. And I think the latest data was 147 terawatts hours. That's a big number in 2023, and it's expected to rise to 600 terawatt. Oh man, that's a big one. That's like what, 3 times bigger by 2030.
Okay.
So it's over 3 times bigger. So that is going to use 11.7% of the U.S.'s total electrical output. So yeah, there's a lot. Again, the efficiency gains are great, but
the usage is up.
Usage is up. Chevron's paradox.
So the big AI companies talk about things like green AI and renewable energy. And so is that real? Are they actually looking into alternatives and alternative energies? I mean, I've heard that they're taking nuclear power plants and putting them back online to do this. And I know that a lot of the data centers for like Bitcoin stuff that have not been utilized.
GPU farms.
Right. The big GPU farms that like the companies went away, they went out of business. They're starting to utilize some of that infrastructure. But is it just PR, or are they actually looking for ways to make this better?
Well, I think if we could get out of the politics of green energy, I mean, nowadays, if you say green energy, they put you into a particular category. Politicians need to get off of the green energy thing. The companies, Microsoft, Google, all those guys, I would love to say they're doing it because they're just great companies and they want to do right, but they're not doing it they're doing it because it's cheaper.
Well, so yeah, wouldn't it save them money?
It does save them money, and they know it. So yes, they are actually, Google's trying to do carbon free. I think their goal is by 2030. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to get rid of these fossil fuels kind of things anytime soon. Now, nuclear power, my dad, when I was growing up a few decades ago, when I was growing up, my dad talked all the time about nuclear energy, and he didn't like fission. But the Chinese are doing it too. They're having the same problem we are, and they're having a lot of problems with climate change. They got desertification, where the deserts are moving toward into their big cities.
Right. Taking it over. So they're looking at it seriously as well, but they're not just putting up solar panels. There are nuclear methods that Bill Gates is behind, backing one where they use other materials instead of fissionable materials. It's a type of nuclear energy that makes it almost impossible, if not impossible, to melt down. It doesn't run like the fission reactors. If you start bringing fission reactors back online, like, I'm not a huge fan of those because they generate some really toxic waste. But if the companies find it to be cheaper to do it, then they will find a way to do it, and they'll find a way to do it that's not going to cause a meltdown, because it's from their perspective, it costs a lot of money to clean it up. Right.
So yes, right. I think it's real if the politicians would stop sticking their nose in it and trying to politicize green energy and make it into something it's not.
Isn't it going to be a little bit too late though? I mean, one of the things that you had said the other day, it's like, you eat the entire cake and then you say, oh, but I'm going to have a salad now.
Hey,
after you've already eaten the entire cake. My
favorite is you eat like when we had the restaurant, remember, it's somebody would come in and order a big old chicken fried steak with gravy and then they'd order a Diet Coke.
Right.
It's like, okay.
Exactly. Isn't this, I mean, is it going to be too little too late?
I don't think anything's too little too late, personally. I mean, they are, again, I think they're going to do it because if you can make it profitable for them to do it, then they're going to do it. You have a big old dog behind you, by the way, just in case you didn't know that.
Sadie. Oh, what's Sadie doing?
She's a big walking
Sadie
rug.
Girl.
She's a big walking
Sadie
rug.
Girl. All right, so talk about chips.
So
talk about chips, GPUs, TPUs, fancy processors. Well, AI is going to need a ton of them, but are they better?
I mentioned that earlier, the Pentium 4s, the NVIDIA A100s. NVIDIA's got some new stuff they've come out with that's supposedly even better. I mentioned Google's TPUs. That was all in my research that I did. So, I mean, Google made those TPUs because they do calculations better, faster, more efficiently. So
are they making
it's not
more
like they're going to
stuff?
stop. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Everybody is. I mean, NVIDIA,
So they're improving it?
They have to, because they don't want to use more energy. They want to get the same amount. The problem is they want to get the same amount of work out of the energy they're currently using. What we'd really like to see them do is use less energy than they're currently using, or at least use, if you can make them more efficient, then you have a better shot at supplementing the problem with green energy. Solar panels, things like that, are not going to ever put out the kind of energy, unless you cover a whole desert with them. They're not going to put out the same kind of energy as natural gas, for example. But if you can make it, it's sort of like when you try to make your house a little more energy. You go out and buy the energy efficient. You have something squeaking in your background.
That is Sadie in the background. I'm sorry, but she's my puppy. She's allowed to be on the podcast.
She's found her squeak toy too.
She's got her little squeak toy back there. She's just perfectly happy. So
she's torturing it from the sounds of it. Anyway,
it's fine.
Yes.
Pretty soon you're going to see like stuffing, flying all over the room because she's going to destroy the toy. Oh, well. Right, okay, so let's talk for just a second about what's going on in Texas.
Well, I'll let you talk a little bit about that, because you talked a little bit about that today at our conference.
Yeah, remember? Well, it's like everyone is talking about the amount of water that this stuff needs.
Texas? What do we do every time our kids give us a hard time? What do we do every time we cross the Llano River?
Hey, Paul, the river's looking pretty good today. Whatever.
Our kids have been giving us a hard time about that for years. But water's a big thing.
The Llano River provides the water for the town. And so when the Llano River is not flowing, we've got some serious problems.
Well, it happened to my dad, because I'm a fifth generation from here, and it went dry. And they had a big drought in the late 40s and early 50s. The Llano River went dry. They were bringing in water by train cars, which we don't even have that option anymore, because they don't run the trains anymore. Okay, and my dad said people were literally coming up to the train tracks with jugs to fill up with water, and it wasn't even drinkable. It was so they could boil it and
just
cook with it.
Just bathe and stuff.
And bathe with it. So yes, that's something to think about.
It's something you have to, it's actually something you don't think about. And I think that's what bothers me the most, is that we were just in a drought not too long ago here in our county, and everyone was scrambling, and we were talking about how we're going to get water. We're going to put some wells in some different places. We're going to, extend the size of our reservoirs and stuff like that.
They stopped inviting me to those meetings.
Guess what? A flood happened and everything got refilled. And then also we're not talking about it anymore.
It's funny you mentioned that. A couple of things that I thought were funny. First, remember why they stopped inviting me to the meetings?
Because you're an engineer and tend to have an opinion.
But it wasn't just that. They would say, well, we're gonna do rainwater collection. So I sat there and did a back of the envelope calculation of how much rainwater they're going to catch, and realized that compared to the usage for the day, it was silly. And then they talked about doing some other stuff, and everything they were talking about was going to cost a lot of money and give you very, very incremental results. Now, the one thing that we talked about today in that thing in Marble Falls was the data center in Amarillo. Why would you put a data center? Do you know where Amarillo probably gets their water from? There's a big reservoir underneath the ground that Kansas and all the northern, the central United States, there's this huge water reservoir they think was left over from the Ice Age, melting glaciers. And they've been pumping on that thing and watering those cornfields up there for a long time. And I suspect that's those wells that are tapped into that. There's a lot of straws in that particular glass of water. And they're talking about putting a data center up there. I mean, I see why Amarillo wants it, but I'm not so sure it's a great place to put it.
I think if you really look at it, that's true. I mean, there's a lot of tornadoes up there, but I think if you look at it, I want to say that only 78 jobs were going to be created by the data center.
Yeah, that's the problem with data centers. They create a lot of jobs while you're building them.
Right.
But it's like a neighborhood. You build out a neighborhood, the construction people come in, they build the neighborhood. It's great. You get it. There's lots of people working. But as soon as you're done and everybody's bought their house and moved in, the contractor construction company moves on, and now you hire some people. Well, they tend to make larger claims than reality when it comes to the number of people they're going to hire. Right. And I suspect that, it's a feather in their cap, because it makes you sound very, very much like you're, the place, like the Austin with the Austin AI Alliance. Austin wants to be the AI capital.
Right.
But our illustrious governor has finally started having discussions about water. They're talking about where they can build pipelines to bring water to the areas like Austin, because you can't keep relying on the river flowing through it and the getting it out of the ground. So they're talking about, maybe they're going to build a water pipe down to Houston. I don't know. It'd seem ironic if you did, considering all the water flows down there, and you're going to grab some and pipe it back up here
Pump
again.
It back up, yeah.
But nonetheless, they are talking about it finally. But the other thing I was going to mention, I'm sorry, I'm running my overtime on this particular one, but in the 50s, I told you about the drought. Well, guess what happened in 54, maybe? The drought ended. Mm-hmm. How did it end? They had a big flood. Well,
huge flood.
The federal government, which I think at the time was probably under Eisenhower was the president, the federal government said, look, we're going to go ahead and build a pipeline to Lake Buchanan, which is the big reservoir lakes that have been put in the 30s and 40s.
Right. The CCR put them in.
Yeah. Franklin, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It's the Conservation Corps, CCC.
Right. CCC.
Yes. The Conservation Corps. My grandfather worked on it. But anyway, the big flood happened, and they literally turned down the federal government's offer to pay to build a pipeline to Lake Buchanan. So now,
all of a sudden, the state of Texas is going, we have to get this done, and now probably the state of Texas is going to have to pay for it.
Well, the city of Llano certainly can't pay for it. I mean, think how much that would. I mean, they could run it down the railroad right away, which is what they were going to do back then. But think of the cost of doing it. I ran fiber to Llano, and it cost a lot.
Yeah. Maybe one of the reasons that they looked at Amarillo specifically is because Amarillo was one of the first cities that have like AI chatbots and stuff. So maybe they're just really forward thinking for their AI. Emma's an AI chatbot that Amarillo, if you go and you can Google it or, look at it on ChatGPT, and she does a lot of stuff for like city services. She answers a lot of questions. So, okay. So question number 9. AI companies actually do make everything run on solar, and they make everything run on like with wind power. We're in the clear, okay? Or is it just going to like continue to grow, continue to eat up the power grid? What do you see for the future of AI when it comes to energy consumption?
What I hope to see, or what I actually see?
What do you hope to see?
What I hope to see is continuing development of solar, like solar panels, and the when we go to that, what is that thing called, Johnson City, the science mill, and the kids loved it. They had a little thing where you could balance the power grid. You turn little knobs, and you had inputs coming in from solar and wind and the natural gas plants.
And the lines too, just electrical lines.
The thing I like about that, though, was, I'm talking about power generation sources. You had all these different sources, and you were bringing them in, and you adjusted during the day. You could dynamically adjust, you're pretending it's a little simulation thing, but the kids loved it. The point that I liked about it is that it was, the state of Texas is doing some good things. We don't get enough credit for it. We don't get enough credit for it, honestly, because the state of Texas does things that really make people like our illustrious governor and some of the stuff he does. But when you look at energy generation, we do a great job. We have some of the biggest solar farms. We have wind farms. They have massive wind farms. I love the things. They look cool. But and we pull that all into the grid. The thing that Texas doesn't do is join the federal grid, because that would be political, and they don't want to do that. Maybe they will now that we've got Trump in office. But we need to join the Fed, because when you start generating power in other places and then distributing across the grid, you got a shot at balancing alternative energy which is green energy, with even things like nuclear, which is kind of green itself. And then, of course, the fossil fuels. I mean, the only thing I would love to get rid of is coal. Coal is just nasty. But when you start talking about natural gas, I don't think you can get rid of that yet. But what I'm afraid of is we're so political about green energy now that we're just going to let China own the solar. I mean, almost all the solar panels are made in China. It's a shame, because they were invented here.
Anyway. All right, so we're running out of time.
I think
so. I'm going to ask you a final question.
Okay, shoot.
Are we moving towards an AI future that's sustainable, or are we just charging full speed ahead and we're just going to hope to figure it out on the way?
The second one.
Yeah. I figured that's what you were going to say. And it's true, and we tend to do that. Hindsight's 20/20, and we make all these mistakes.
What are the Silicon Valley bros? What's their mantra? That's what Elon Musk believes in, right? That's what he's doing right now with the federal government. Move fast and break things. Move fast and break things. That's the mantra. So when AI, I mean, they've taken the guardrails off, and I think they were. I do agree with. I hate to keep agreeing with Vance because I'm not a huge fan, but the guy, when it comes to AI stuff, I agree with him. The fact is that when you try to regulate it before it's even invented, you'll kill it before it ever gets started.
Well, that's what happened with the AI policy that we tried to put into the handbook. I mean, the attorneys were trying to regulate a policy that they didn't even know why the policy needed to be put in place. So yes. I completely agree that if you can't just think that you're going to know how every situation is going to turn out before the situation occurs.
When I was working at Harris Semiconductor, we were designing audio chips, and we had one we were coming out with, and there was an engineer there that wanted to build, before we built the first chip, he wanted to create a test case to test every permutation of that chip. It was going to take him 6 months just to build the test suite, and then another 6 months to run it. The lifespan of that particular technology was going to be measured in a year or so anyway. So he was going to kill the thing before it ever got started. I don't think you can regulate your way out of it. I do think that if everybody pulls on the same end of the rope and says, hey, our goal is to keep from killing the planet while we use this incredible tool, let's figure out how to do that. There's some really smart people out there in the US, in Europe, even in China that will make this happen. And yes, we can become more sustainable. We got to stop politicizing whether or not you have a solar panel or not. Who cares? It's a tool for a job. It's a tool to generate energy. If I want to have an electric car, then I personally don't have an electric car, but that doesn't mean that I think everybody who has one is bad. Balance the realities of what you need with the politics and move the politics out of that. Go fix the bridges and stop worrying about whether or not somebody's driving electric cars.
Right. We need some infrastructure help, definitely.
Yeah, and again, if they'll focus on the problems we need to fix, and I do agree with Vance, I just don't think you can regulate your way out of the AI stuff. I think they're going to have to move fast and break things as long as there's a goal to fix them.
Right. You don't just break things and then just keep on. You have to say, okay, and I'm going to use an analogy. It's like when I clean the house sometimes. My daughter said this to me the other day. She was like, Mom, we started cleaning and now it's a lot messier than it's ever been. And I'm like, you have to mess things up to actually clean things.
Your house cleaning thing we could do a whole podcast about the way
you have to move the furniture around so you can clean under the furniture.
You're like, okay, we're going to throw it away, we're going to get rid of it, or we're going to put it in the front yard. You believe in that old-fashioned spring cleaning they used to say, where they move all the furniture outside, the rugs and everything? That's you right there. That's you.
Put that mattress out in the sun for a few days. Exactly.
Absolutely. Move everything out.
All right. Well, we are out of time. I would like to say that we are trying something a little new. I'm sorry that we've got my dog's tail in the background back there if you're watching the video. We're going to post the video on our YouTube channel, and, so you can actually watch the video, or you can always just listen to us on audio. We're on Spotify, Amazon, on our website, a lot of different platforms. We really enjoy talking about artificial intelligence. I'd love it if you guys would subscribe, make sure you like. Also, if you have any specific questions that you want, put them in the comments.
I have a question.
Yes. Okay.
What are we doing? What's our next AI thing? Do you know? Where are we going to be next?
The next event that we're going to?
Yeah, where we're going to be next. Or I think it's a webinar, isn't it? Isn't it a webinar?
No, we don't have a webinar. So the next thing that we're doing is we're going to be up in Dallas at Klon 25. We're going to be up there talking about AI in March. And then we have a webinar for Sequoia, which is like a big conference they do called Sequoia. And then we are talking at Hudson-Tillotson University about AI. And
we're not just talking. We're actually talking to we usually talk to the staff and the PhD students, and we talk about
It's like a training.
AI.
We're doing like a 90-minute training, but it's not like a full half day.
So the big question is
are we going to San Diego?
Is Maurie going to get on an airplane? Inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah.
Remember that saying?
We have an opportunity to go to San Diego. I'm not supposed to say anything about this until tomorrow. So since the podcast won't drop until tomorrow, I can go ahead and say
what it is. You just say we're going to San Diego.
We were given an innovation award for Agnes, and they want us to come up and talk in like almost like a roundtable type discussion where they have like 12 different people talking, almost like a pitch, like it's 12 different little sections that they're all talking at the same time for like 40 minutes. And they want us to come up and do a pitch. I'll drive it. I'm ready.
Road pitch.
17 hours.
Road trip, road pitch.
Too bad I don't have an electric car. Then I could just do self-driving.
You don't have to have an electric. Well, I don't think they make a gasoline self-driving car, do they?
I don't think so.
I don't think I've ever heard of that.
I don't think so. So I hope that you guys have a marvelous rest of the week.